And so, ladies and gentlemen, I come to the following conclusion. I discovered 20 years ago the inferiority complex, which had been proved to be a very worthwhile key for understanding human nature and personalities.
Welcome to AdlerCast, the podcast devoted to the psychological theories of Alfred Adler. I'm your host, Kevin Sell, and this week we'll be discussing Adler's concept of phenomenology. If this is your first time listening, and you've never heard of Alfred Adler, well, my friends, you're missing out. His influence on the field of psychology is immense, and still resonates to this day. So who was he? Born in 1870 on the outskirts of Vienna, our little Alfred was a sickly child, plagued by numerous ailments. I bring this up because this early experience with illness and perceived physical inferiority would have an impact in his later psychological theories. Graduating from the University of Vienna in 1895 with a degree in medicine, he soon started a private practice, focusing on internal medicine. Interestingly, many of his patients were performers from the local circus, leading to the suggestion by many that this also influenced his psychological theories, with its focus on organ inferiorities and compensation. In 1902, Adler received an invitation from the all too infamous Sigmund Freud to attend a Wednesday night informal discussion group, which marked the beginning of the psychoanalytic movement, with Adler soon becoming its first president. In 1911, Adler left the group, the first of many great dissenters of orthodox psychoanalysis. A discussion of why Adler left would be much too detailed for this podcast, but suffice it to say, there existed personality as well as philosophical differences. Following his break with Freud, Adler found quite a bit of success and public recognition in building his own independent school of psychotherapy. He traveled and lectured for over 25 years and, by the 1930s, had established numerous Adlerian child guidance clinics. So, what do his psychological theories look like? Well, for one, they are known as individual psychology. Individual, in this case, doesn't necessarily mean what you may think it means. Rather, it is a reference to the Latin word invitus, meaning indivisibility. His approach viewed a person as an indivisible whole, and in order to fully understand a person, we must see them in their totality. The individual is more than the sum of his or her parts, and is embedded in a social field. As such, Adler's psychology has a strong focus on both the social field in which an individual exists and on the phenomenology of the individual. And it is to this concept, phenomenology, that we turn to next. Phenomenology, as a philosophical discipline distinct from ontology, epistemology, and the like, began in the early 20th century with the work of Edmund Husserl. As an interesting side note, Alfred Adler was actually a classmate of Husserl. In its simplest definition, phenomenology is the study of consciousness from the first-person point of view. In other words, it is the study of the phenomena of our consciousness, the ways we experience things, the meanings we ascribe to things, the appearance of things, and things as they appear in our experience. Perhaps Husserl himself put it best. To begin with, we put the proposition, pure phenomenology is the science of pure consciousness. So what does this have to do with psychology? Well, a key concept in Adlerian psychology is that of the lifestyle, which is basically the schema, or set of schemas, that an individual uses to move through life and toward their goals. And this lifestyle, in other words, this cognitive map, is based upon our individual perceptions of the world. To quote Adler, "I am convinced that a person's behavior springs from his idea, because our senses do not receive actual facts, but merely a subjective image of them. Since we each apprehend the world according to our own subjective view, the way we operate in the world will be based upon that subjective view." Now, For a break from all this technical discussion, let's pause, sit back, and listen to a bit of Bob Dylan's masterpiece, It's Alright Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, from his 1965 album, Bringing It All Back Home. When we listen to this song, we get to experience the concept of phenomenology in action, for the music grants us poetically mediated access to Dylan's consciousness at the time of its writing, which was 1964. Through his imagistic writing, with its rich emotional landscape and undercurrents of nihilism and existentialism, we experience Dylan's frustrations with not only the political environment of the times, but also the protest movement and American culture as a whole. The author Paul Williams, in his book, Bob Dylan, Performing Artist, points out that the song also addresses the possibility that the most important and least articulated political issue of our times is that we are all being fed a false picture of reality, and it's coming at us from every direction. Again, we see the phenomenological influence here, with the indication of a multiplicity of felt realities. So how is this concept useful to us as clinicians? Well, a key point here is that how life is in reality, if there even is such a thing, is less important than how the individual perceives that reality. By understanding the client's subjective reality, which includes their perceptions, thoughts, feelings, values, beliefs, convictions, and conclusions, we can begin to understand their behavior. And any successful therapeutic process must begin with understanding. Moreover, the usefulness of this concept is culturally universal and is incredibly valuable when working with clients from other backgrounds. As clinicians, we bring our own lifestyles and preconceived notions to any interaction. This includes our culturally encoded gestalt. By attempting to understand the way the world appears to the client, we can, in some way, attempt to bridge the cultural gap and see the world through the client's eyes, thereby enabling us to help them in a much more profound way. It should also be noted that the phenomenological approach is also very useful when working with couples or families. Once we acknowledge that each client is operating under a rubric of their own subjective phenomenological reality, the clinician can help them to see each other's perspective and hopefully bring them into closer alignment, which will go a long way towards resolving any problems they may be presenting. In conclusion, by now, I hope it is obvious the importance of this phenomenological approach in any therapeutic process. It should also be clear how this forms the underpinning of the rest of Alfred Adler's psychological theories. I want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of AdlerCast. We'll see you next week.